you, Guyana, and welcome to this week's edition of Facing the Nation. Of course, we do, as always, whenever we have a late start, we do apologize for the late start. Of course, thank you very much for joining us. Today's program will focus on two areas, two issues, one set of guests. They're actually returning guests. But first off, you would have read in the news and, of course, seen on some of the various newscasts that the U.S. State Department's Trafficking in Persons report was recently released. Of course, trafficking in persons for Guyana has always been a very sometimes touchy subject because we've even had in the past, the previous administration, they went into a phase of denying the degree or the level to which trafficking in persons existed in Guyana. Of course, we hope to see change with the new administration, but I'm not having a government representative to talk about that today. Today I have a young lady who is the president of the Guyana Women Miners organization, Miss Eureka Primus. She is here in studio with us. She will basically give you, because I know you've read some of the organization's sentiments in the news also, but she's basically here to not only give her organization's response to the Trafficking in Persons report, but she's going to talk about what they're expecting Guyana to do, what we should do as a nation and as a government to improve our situation, because again, we're still on the tier 2 watch list. Coming up a little later on in the program, the Scouts Association, they have returned and they're having a big event a little later on this month, so you'll be hearing about that, and I'll also remind you that the government is in full support of the Scouts Association of Guyana. But for now, let's talk Trafficking in Persons report with President of the Guyana Women Miners organization, Miss Eureka Primus. Eureka, welcome to Facing the Nation.
Thank you for having us.
All right, it is definitely great to have you. First off, your initial reaction to the fact that Guyana is still on the tier 2 watch list when it comes to the report coming out from the U.S. State Department regarding trafficking in persons.
Well, actually, we're still on tier 2, but we're off of the watch list because of the plans in which the government has submitted. Mm-hmm. But at this point, what we're looking for is a change from plans to action. Because if we can come off the watch list just based on plans, then just think about if we follow up with the relevant recommendations and the implementation of the strategies that were submitted, how we could be ranked next year.
Okay, so tier 2, but not necessarily the watch list is worse than just simply being on tier 2. And of course, you're saying that the plans are what took us off of the watch list.
Yes, because the report did specify that we came off not because we fully met the criteria, but because of the plans in which the government had submitted.
All right, great. I was reading a part of it, and they're saying that you just said it. We're not fully there yet. We have not been able to fully achieve. In your organization's opinion, and some of the work and your experience, the work that you would have been doing in the organization, what are we missing? What is Guyana not doing to completely be removed from that level?
I think what we're missing is not only the need for a strategic plan with regards to trafficking, because yes, we have the task force, we have the counter-trafficking unit, but we need to have one coordinated effort as to how it is we're going to do this. And that is utilizing all of the resources, not only financial, but also human. Because if you're in an area in which you're not familiar with, but you have key persons in which you're willing to collaborate with, then we can make a greater impact, especially when it comes to the areas out of Georgetown, as specified in the report. The focus is not only in the city, but the areas outside of the city, and providing the same services to the persons who are there instead of having everything centralized.
All right. For a bit, let's talk about your organization's, the Women Miners organization's goal, not only goal, your function. How do you function in terms of addressing trafficking in persons, and to what level can you go?
The organization has a national body of members who are not only present but also advocate in their regions, and would bring that information to our attention, and we would be able to assist them in whatever way possible. As such, we would be able to have a national scope on where the issues are and how they can be addressed. We would also do rescues, rehabilitation. During last year, for the last 2 years, we were calling for a home that is specific to victims of trafficking. And through collaboration, we've been able to do that. So we have moved.
Home.
Yes.
Okay.
But we've moved past one milestone into going into another. And at this point, what we're trying to do is to not only look at trafficking with the rescuing of the victims, but to look at it from the source, which is addressing poverty and girls' access in education.
Okay. Is your organization in a position to, you talked about addressing this source. Are you in a position to institute preventative measures?
Once we have the funding, that's the only issue, because we have the resources, we have the plan, but we function now based on fundraising and also the support of the members. However, on 2 occasions, we have benefited from grants from the British High Commission and Canada Fund for Local Initiatives.
What support have you been getting, or what other support are you expecting from government, Guyana's government?
Well, we met with the government earlier this year because last year what we had proposed to them, we were receiving reports that we could not afford to respond to. So at that point, we were pitching a partnership whereby we would be able to provide our human resources and they would be able to finance us to go. And they also have vehicles in which we would be able to utilize, because the most expensive part of the budget is the transportation. But we didn't receive any response from that. And earlier this year, we were able to meet with the subject minister, but again, nothing moved forward from that. So we still have those reports. We still have persons who are calling us for assistance, and we try as best as we can to respond, but as it is, we cannot respond to all.
Your hands are tied.
Yes.
All right. So you're more or less calling for more intervention.
Yes.
More intervention from government. Again, and viewers, this next question is not to knock our members of the police force, even though in some cases, which I'll tell you about a little later on in the program, in some cases they need knocking. Are our traffic ranks equipped enough, trained enough to handle trafficking in persons issues in Guyana? Because at the end of the day, they're supposed to be law and order. We should be able to rely on them, even though there are organizations such as yourself that that are doing what they should be doing.
Yes.
Are in your experience and the reports that you probably got in your organization, are they equipped? Does it look as though they're going to be equipped anytime soon to handle trafficking persons issue?
Equipped to handle trafficking in persons therefore means that you would have to have one trained rank at every police station. And we've been trying to do that with sexual offenses for quite some time, and even that we have not achieved. But the major stymie for the police, because now we are getting greater support from them, but their only problem now is that in a lot of the interior locations, they don't have transportation. So when you bring out the victim and you have to go for the perpetrator, they don't have vehicles in which they can respond to in a timely manner. In some cases, they can't respond at all. Take, for instance, in January, we rescued 2 victims from Region 1. One was a victim of trafficking, the other was a victim of rape. And when those persons were brought out to Kaituma, the police were trying to get vehicle to go back in for another case and also return for the perpetrators, but there weren't any in which they could have borrowed. The region's vehicles were down. The other agency said that they can't use their vehicles for armed conflict, and they can't respond. So at that time, what we would do, in any event that we find a shortcoming, we would always send recommendations to the government, because it's not just to identify the area, but to see how it could be addressed for improvement.
Is it a case where you're not getting government response, or is it a case where it's slow? Because I'm trying to understand here, because again, trafficking in persons is an issue for all of Guyana. We should all be concerned, because we're all connected to a mother, a wife, and in most cases, I'm not saying it's the only case, but in most cases it affects the female. Is it a case where you're not getting responses, or the organization feels that the responses are too slow?
We're getting responses, but not from all ministries.
Okay.
You would get a response from Ministry of Public Security, or if Natural Resources can help, but we don't get any response from Social Protection. That is the ministry that's in charge of counter-trafficking.
Okay.
And if we are to move forward, and if we campaign on an issue that is something that has to be addressed, then all the parties should be willing and ready to address the issue wherever it lies.
Okay, well, I trust that after this broadcast, there will be some sort of movement and improvement. Of course, viewers, if you're now tuning in to this Facing the Nation, our initial conversation is about trafficking in persons. Most of you would have read about the fact that the U.S. State Department recently released its annual report on trafficking in persons. And of course, as Ms. Primus explained earlier, even though we're off of the watch list, we're still at tier 2, and that is something that we would like to have fixed as soon as possible. If I can just step back here, in terms of my question, the question I posed about the ranks in the various communities, I'm assuming you would prefer female ranks to be trained to deal with these issues?
Not only females, but also males, because the ratio of female to male percentage in the police force doesn't only deal with females having the knowledge, but the males also. And in some cases, we found that some of the male officers are even more compassionate about the issue because of the fact that they have children, they have wives. And even with reports coming into the organization from the public, we have received an increase of males reporting instances of trafficking or suspected cases of trafficking.
In total, in general, have you, in your estimation, maybe let's go maybe about in the last year, since the 2015 report would have been published, in terms of reports, have there been an increase or a decrease? This is just in reports alone about trafficking in persons, people calling to report.
There's been an increase in it simply because a lot of persons now know what it is. Because
What to look for.
within our culture, you might see something happening, and some persons would say that, well, it's not their issue, they're not going to deal with it. No one wants to be the whistleblower in the situation. But when persons hear of what these girls actually go through, because you might see one person and something might click that something is wrong here, but you don't know the full extent of what that person is enduring on a daily basis. As such, when persons are sensitized as to the reality of these victims, a lot more persons empathize with them and bring awareness to us, and also bring the information that could possibly lead to that person being rescued and the perpetrators facing justice.
And I'm happy that you talked about the perpetrators facing justice, because that brings me to the other question, the question of prosecution level and so on. What are you calling for? What would you like to see? Because in the report, the U.S. State Department report also talks about that.
Because if the report is read in full, I believe the ministry had mentioned that they rescued over 50 victims during that period, but only one prosecution was mentioned. And that, to me, there is an area there that we need to develop on. Even earlier this year, when the task force were amending their protocols, we had suggested that they include within the task force members of the judicial system also, because there is need for sensitization there as well. There is a need for them to be a part of the process. It's not just us, them, and the police, but also when it moves from the police, it goes over to the court. So the court should also have a role to play in it to ensure that these persons are not only rescued, but they face the full extent of the law. And that means that the persons in which are trafficking will at least have some sort of satisfaction for what they've had to endure. Because we've had endless cases of persons who were trafficked, the persons were charged, but the cases were thrown out of court for various reasons. Persons weren't informed they had to go to court. Some persons were attending court and the cases were thrown out nonetheless. So at the beginning of the rule of the new government, they had mentioned that they would have launched a commission of inquiries into trafficking in persons, and we were patiently awaiting for that to commence. But to date, I haven't seen it bear any fruit.
So the organization would still want to see the launching of this investigation?
Yes, because there are a number of girls who they never got justice for their cases, and irrespective of the time frame, those are scars that cannot be healed. And they would still have open wounds. There are still persons who are in need of justice.
Yeah, and some people call it closure, wanting closure. Of course, today, viewers, my conversation with Ms. Primus is just a brief one. I hope to have either herself or some other representative from the organization come back and not only talk about that, but quickly, because I quickly want to ask you about some of your other work and your operations, but before we do that, I'm just giving you an opportunity to give another call, at least on this program, to government and whoever else you want involved in terms of addressing trafficking in persons?
What we would like to do is not only from the government, but also civil societies, religious bodies, members of the community. If you are interested in combating trafficking, then you're free to call us. We're open to collaboration with any and all agencies, especially persons from rural communities. We have, over the years, been able to identify areas that traffickers are targeting, and we would like to reach with persons from those communities to see what are the source of those issues and why these communities are actually being targeted, to address it from the source, because it's not just responding to the issue, but seeing what creates the issue so you can stop it from its source.
From its source. All right. Just in about a minute, could you quickly talk about some of the other things? Because if in reading and keeping abreast with the news, you know that we know Guyana, that the Guyana Women Miners organization has been very busy. Let's talk about some of the other things generally that you are involved in, the organization is involved in.
Well, the organization actually has two fragments. There's one group that deals with mining and the other group that deal with social issues.
Yeah.
From the perspective of the group that deal with mining, they have been continuously encouraging miners to follow the regulations and the Mining Act, and to also update them of the ever-changing industry, bring them up to date with the new conventions in which the government has signed, new ones that are being proposed, and also their role and their rights in society. The other fragment of it is the group that deals with social issues, and they would be responsible for rescuing, assisting, and rehabilitation of victims of exploitation, rape, trafficking in persons, violence against women, and also loaning support to persons seeking justice for crimes that were committed against them. So the organization over its existence has always been busy and will continue to be, because within the area of trafficking, we not only have the facility to manage, but we also continue to rescue, continue to provide assistance. Even in some cases, we've had to provide victims with assistance to return to their countries of origin, and then coordinate resources for them there, because it's not just returning the victim home, but also creating a better life for them when they return home, and ensuring that they have support irrespective of where they are.
Okay, all right, great. Thank you so very much for being here, Ms. Eureka Primus. Of course, viewers, this has been a conversation with Eureka Primus. She is the president of the Guyana Women Miners organization. Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure.
You're welcome.
All
Have a
right,
good day.
viewers, I'll take a quick break. On the other side of the break, we will be talking about the Scouts Association. Stay tuned.